Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my February reading wrap-up. Stressed at the moment. Arwen has come to cheer me up. Don't really want to film this right now, but also I don't want to stop taking part in the hobbies that bring me joy just because they also take energy and I'm tired. I think that will lead to a negative cycle of depression, which I am currently not struggling as much as with depression as I am with anxiety. So we're going to talk about books, but first we're going to talk a little bit about anxiety. Making sure that I don't burn out again is continuing to engage in my hobbies, which I did not do during the time that I was barreling towards burnout the last time. The first book I read and enjoyed immensely was Redemptor by Ifueko. I have a signed edition. I didn't get to meet the author. This was just a signed edition that was sitting in an indie bookstore that I found, and it was on sale too, like a few dollars off. I read the first book, Raybearer, a few years ago, and I was just nervous about reading the second one because I was nervous if it would live up to the first one, and also because the first one was kind of complicated and emotionally charged. I thought I needed to be in a good place to read this one. This one actually was less tiring to read, less complicated. It's less important that you know all of the many characters that are introduced. The themes are pretty simple and easy to understand. Strong themes of being a social justice warrior and trying to do everything to fix everything at once, and feeling immense guilt over your amount of privilege, and especially if you live in a colonialist empire that is built on the bones of millions killed by your ancestors. It's very on the nose. How that feels and how it doesn't work to look at it that way, and how you have to take care of yourself. You have to be honest with your friends and family, those around you. The voices in your head and sometimes outside of your head can say horrible things to you. That doesn't mean they're true. And you need to lean on support of others, and it needs to be a collaborative work. You cannot save the world yourself. Yeah, I really enjoyed those themes. It was also quite an easy read. I think I read it in about 3 days. I really enjoyed the furthering of the characters, the furthering of the love of romance, learning more about the other characters, and continuation of the asexual representation of Dio, and also representation of our main character not wanting kids. I thought all that was really great. Oh, also it talks a little bit about violent versus non-violent revolution and change, dying in glory versus living to fight another day. Oh, such good themes, so well developed and examined in here. 5 stars. Then, to combine Black History Month with the continuing ed that we're supposed to engage in for the PSL, I read Revolution in Our Time, the Black Panther Party's Promise to the People by Kekla Magoon. If you're not aware, Black Panther Party was a Marxist-Leninist party. And so I learned quite a lot. I didn't know that much before. I knew a few things that I had read on social media. I knew that what my school books taught me about them being just violent and anti-white was not true. By the way, if you want adorable little cars with cats on them wearing keffiyehs, this is from WatanPalestine.com. But I learned in this book how it started through how it ended, so the whole progression. It was fairly general, not into too many specifics, because it was cramming a lot of time and development into a 12 or 14 hour audiobook, I think, and it was mostly a historical thing, so it wasn't like a profile of any one person, and it wasn't all about the politics, which the next book I'm reading about the Black Panthers is all about their politics. It was very much a historical record. I learned about, they did not just do breakfast programs, they also did healthcare programs, and basically ran their own free clinics with volunteer doctors and nurses and such, bought and had donated to them medical supplies and stuff, started a foundation to look into sickle cell anemia, and that in the cops and FBI's battle against them, they would break into the Panther offices and clinics and would burn the food for the free breakfast and destroy the medical supplies that they were giving out for free or using to treat people for free. The history of the Black Panthers is also a history of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover specifically. And they were evil, and there's not much nuance to be had there. Like, we have declassified documents of the FBI itself that show that they were persecuting the Panthers because of their political ideology and the fact that they were uniting black people together and were forcing police to stop killing black people. And they didn't like that and knew it was a threat ultimately to white supremacy and capitalism, so they set out on a campaign to destroy them. It introduced me to a lot of the names and dates, as well as actions of the Black Panthers and the things that were done against them, and I really recommend it if you are more of a beginner in learning about the Black Panthers. If you already know a lot, this probably won't be much new information, but I definitely think it was helpful in giving me a starter understanding so that I can now go on to more detailed books that get into specifics of different areas. And I'm going to be reading a few more memoirs and biographies about individual members such as Assata Shakur and Angela Davis. An audiobook that I read very early in the month was The Davenports by Krystal and Marquis. This has been advertised as a historical fiction. I would call it a historical romance, and as I was reading the reviews, a lot of the complaints were this was advertised as a historical fiction, but it's definitely, some cat is causing a ruckus over there. It's definitely mostly focused on the romance rather than the historical aspects, although it doesn't follow the normal structure of a romance because it is about 4 different characters, each having romances, so you don't spend that much time with each couple. It's kind of, I think, going to be like a series of connected romances, except that you learn some development of each romance in each book, rather than one book being about one couple, another being about another couple. So it's kind of a funny format, which I think made it difficult to advertise. But it's very enjoyable if you don't mind things that don't stick so perfectly to the romance genre as far as formulaicness. So it is about basically 2 wealthy black families in the 1910s. So my family has just started watching The Gilded Age at our girls' nights, and that is about 30 years earlier. So this book is kind of set between that and Downton Abbey, which starts in about 1914 and continues into the 20s. But in The Gilded Age, there is a plot line about a wealthy black woman and her family and them living in the wealthy black circles of New York. This book is set in Chicago, but it also highlights the lesser known history of rich black people in the times of Jim Crow. So this is about 2 daughters of one family, a daughter of another family who's friends with them, and the maid of the first family. And all of them having romances, all with black men, so it is a black romance. Each couple is also used to explore different dynamics and historical points that were going on at the time, such as people who were working for black liberation at the time, people who just cared about money and business, how people treated black people with light skin versus dark skin, the transition from carriages to horseless carriages, people getting married across class lines. So it's all very interesting, and it does give you a lot of historical information, but the focus is definitely on the romances, and I enjoyed every single one of the romances. There were definitely some instances where characters really messed up, but I think that they either recovered well during this story or are going to recover well during the following ones. I did not realize that it was a series until I got to the end, and it was not totally resolved for everyone. So now I'm eagerly awaiting the next book. 4.5 stars. Then I got an arc from an author friend of Azalea Crowley called How to Marry a Lich by Lizzie Strong. This is a monster romance. It's also a bit of a gothic story, so there's a lot of gross stuff in it. Enough gross stuff that it's hard to read while you're eating. It also is heavy on the sex scenes, which were to my personal taste, so I enjoyed those. I also enjoyed how sweet the characters were. I really liked all of the characters, including the side characters. I didn't actually finish it yet because I needed to read other things, and I actually haven't had that good a reading month, mostly thanks to my stress levels and my tiredness levels. But I got about 250 pages into it, and I then skimmed to the end to see if I liked that part. My biggest complaint is that it was really awkwardly written. The prose was just not good in a lot of places. Like, there was repetitive word choice, and a lot of times the characters would laugh at things that weren't funny for excessive amounts of time. And I get how that makes people in the real world seem charming. But both in TV and in books, I find that it's better to tell the joke, and if the reader laughs but the characters don't, it's fine, but it's really awkward when the characters laugh but the reader doesn't think it's funny. That was part of the awkwardness. And so I thought maybe this was a debut, because a lot of debuts, especially indie authors, are written like that. But this author has published like 7 other books, so I think that's just the way she writes and is not really getting any better. And maybe an editor could fix that. And the author just hasn't been able to afford one yet. I don't know. But that was a fairly major detractor, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. Then I went ahead and read the Communist Manifesto because my library had an audiobook of it. It was that and other writings, all by Marx and Engels. It actually was much more intelligible than the version that Lenin wrote to celebrate the birthday of the Manifesto sometime later. Lenin used the word dialectics a lot, which I had not yet learned what that meant. I learned that a little later on. But yeah, the manifesto made a lot of sense. And the other writings were mostly shortish essays debunking things that other philosophers of the time had said. I decided not to rate that because I thought it'd be weird. Then we have Mornings in Jenin by Susan Abulhawa. This one was a lot. Listen to it on audiobook. I haven't been made that distraught by a fiction work in a long time, since I've been more careful about what I read. But a large reason for that is that it drew from a lot of non-fictional events. And one of the most distressing parts about it is that the major historical events that the author was describing all actually happened. They were just personalized to these fictional characters' lives. There's so many trigger warnings for this. I'm gonna direct you to Storygraph because that usually has some of the most comprehensive lists. I had to stop reading for a while when a particular thing happened in the book. If you want a book of hope, I would not say that this is it. There are bittersweet moments, but there's no sweetness without the bitter in this story. But if you want to have a lot of the horrors of Palestinian history over 2 generations, from the 20s through the early 2000s, personalized via a family's experience, then that's what this book does. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, so that's the slot it would go into on my little stats thing. But I didn't leave a review for it on there because there are a large number of reviews already, and just don't feel like I can talk particularly coherently or objectively about the content of this book. But it's exceptionally well done. Then we have Balcony on the Moon by Ibtisam Barakat, and this is a memoir, and obviously the author is still alive because she wrote it. So a little more hopeful, quite a bit more actually, than Mornings in Jenin. There is a book that this author has written about her early childhood. Now he's on my lap. That I also want to read because I'm very interested in the lives of kids. This picks up when she is 9 or 10, and it is about her getting an education. What are you knocking over? Could you not? Trigger warning for this one as well. Once again, I will, thank you Pippin, refer you to Storygraph for an extensive list, but I do want to talk about the fact that there is suicidal ideation and endangerment of children by a parent, and yeah, stuff along those lines. Early on, her father had narcolepsy, which interestingly enough my granddad had, and her father drove trucks for a living, so that was a bit dangerous because he wasn't on medication at the time of the beginning of the book, so that was quite dangerous, and he, as we all do, lived in an ableist society and was afraid he wouldn't be able to make money to support his family, and felt awful because he endangered himself and others every time he tried to do his job. That led to those feelings that I was telling you about. So internalized ableism as well. That was the heaviest part of the book. There are stories of protests and curfews and hearing of massacres happening far away. Our narrator is not subject to a massacre at any point. It talks about going to UNRWA schools and how she worked so hard for her education, and how when she was in 8th grade, her mother asked her to teach her and catch her up to 8th grade because she had to leave at 15, leave school to get married and start popping out kids. So she was still quite young, and at the time she asked her daughter to do this, and it's about Ibtisam teaching her mother about her relationships with her siblings. I really like the title drop is really excellent. I really like that part of the story. So I gave it 5 stars. I forgot to talk about this book, so I'm going to put it in here. Forged by Blood by Ehigbor Okosun. This had been an anticipated read for me. I had seen several people who I respected the opinions of promote it and talk highly of it. Unfortunately, it was not for me, and I also had some problems with it quality-wise, not just taste-wise. I really like the world building, and there were 2 sort of plot ways of going about things. There was a political area of the plot, and there was a adventure story part of the plot, and I really liked the adventure story part. I thought that was well done and a fun romp, but the political parts, not so much. They felt contrived, and I'll get to that more in a little bit. But the main thing is, if I don't like the characters of a story, I'm not gonna like the book. And the main character was okay. I liked her a fair amount. Some of her actions made sense, and her personality was likable and understandable. I really quite enjoy impulsive, do the right thing type characters. However, that aspect of her character didn't make all that much sense, considering what she had been through and the society she was living in. This is a very oppressive society, specifically towards magical people, and it's super colorist. And our main character is a magical person who is black. It's also pretty authoritarian, and not nice to the peasantry, which is also what she is part of. And she also had a pretty traumatic childhood that we start seeing. That is where we begin the book. The fact that she is so impulsive as far as doing the right thing in a society where the wrong thing is happening all the time, and of course you would always want to stop it, and the only way you survive is by keeping your head down. It doesn't make sense really that she would have survived to the beginning of the second part of the story if that is how she acts regularly. So, and it would be more believable if something changed her mind about how to act and she suddenly decided, I'm not going to put up with this anymore and I'm going to do the right thing even if it costs me. But that moment isn't really explored. She just decides to save these 2 slave children. Who cares about the consequences? And it's not shown that she wrestles with that in any way, wrestles with the consequences to her and her family. So that was kind of frustrating. The other 2 characters who we spend the most time with are her 2 love interests. So yeah, love triangle, which I didn't mind the love triangle aspect of it so much because I knew who she was going to get with, and usually and the one she wasn't going to get with was clearly a dick. But yeah, he was supposed to be her childhood friend and he was not a nice person to her, and he felt entitled to her, and it was gross. And he's clearly supposed to be a character that we root for, at least in some way, so that was annoying. And then the other character, his only personality trait was nice, despite the fact that he's been through a lot in his past and has a backstory. That doesn't seem to influence who he is as a person. He just is very uncomplicated, nice. And while I really enjoy a soft, nice character, there needs to be a little bit more characterization than that. The main character's actions not making sense, and her way of thinking about things not making sense in relation to the history of things that have happened to her, also comes up when in the political portion where she is a pacifist and other people who are kind of on the same side as her want to handle things violently, and she's of the Avatar, The Last Airbender persuasion, where you can beat people up and lock them up in prison, but you can't kill them. And having the comparison of Atla right there makes it very clear that this main character doesn't work for her pacifism. She doesn't try to work it out with examples from the past of when it has and hasn't worked, like Aang does in Atla. There are 5 or 6 episodes devoted to exploring his pacifism and when violence versus non-violence works and has better outcome, and how firmly you have to believe in pacifism to go against the lessons of history that tend to teach that killing your opponent is necessary for victory, and you can only build a better world if you get rid of people, and examples of people in the past who tried to be pacifists and it didn't work out. So in Atla, Aang wrestles with that and works really hard to come to a conclusion that the pacifism that was trained in him at a young age and is a deep part of his culture is worthwhile and is the right thing to do. Whereas in this story, the main character's basic reasoning for it is something that we're introduced to at the very beginning of the story, which is that if these magical people kill, they lose their magic. And that just really felt like a cop-out for having an actual conversation about violence versus pacifism. Maybe that conversation is slated to take place in the next book, because it does look like we're going to have more conflict between these two ideas in that book, but I just felt like especially in a duology as opposed to a trilogy, which I think it's a duology, you need to get at least half your stuff done in the first book. And with the characterization and the pacifism examination being hardly done at all in this first book, I am not encouraged to read the second one. So officially I gave it 3 stars. This is more like a 2.5 star, but I didn't want to two-star it on Goodreads because I only do that to books where I had like where it made me mad, and this one just made me disappointed. Definitely willing to read more from this author in the future, just maybe not this duology. And that's all I read this month. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!